We've been learning fascinating facts about life cycles. Today we explore how animals and plants depend on one another for survival. Today we discuss food chains, also known as food webs. Animals and plants are designed to keep a cycle going. This cycle keeps the earth healthy as well as every living creature on the earth. All living organisms have a purpose in nature. So, a producer is a living thing such as a plant that can make its own food. A consumer is a living thing that can't make its own food and it depends on producers or other things for food. A herbivore is an animal that eats only plants or producers. So, a giraffe is an example of a herbivore because they only eat plants. A carnivore is an animal that only eats other animals. A lion is an example of a carnivore because lions are meat eaters, they only eat meat. An omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and other animals. A decomposer is a living thing that feeds on the waste and remains of plants and animals. Remember that a habitat is an environment that meets the needs of an organism. A niche is the role of an organism in its habitat. A food chain is a series of organisms that depend on one another for food. So, if we think about this, we have the flower who can produce its own food. Well, a caterpillar is a consumer because it's going to depend on the flower for food. A frog is also a consumer because the frog is going to depend on the caterpillar for food. A snake is a consumer because the snake might eat the frog for energy or food. And then an owl is also a consumer because the owl is going to eat the snake for energy or food. So, this is how the food chain works. The flower produces food for the caterpillar. The caterpillar becomes a meal for the frog. The frog is a meal for a snake, and the snake is a meal for an owl. Prey, these are the animals or consumers that are eaten by predators. A predator is a consumer that eats the prey. And this is an example of a food web. This is a group of food chains that overlap. So, the tree is also going to be giving energy to not only the caterpillar, but it also could be giving energy to a fly as well as a mushroom because a mushroom is a decomposer. And if the tree is dying or parts of the tree is dying, then the mushroom would eat off of those parts. A bush might be giving energy to an ant as well as a mouse. However, the mouse is going to be giving energy to an owl because that owl is going to eat the mouse. Whereas if you're thinking about squirrels, well, a squirrel could consume a bug such as a caterpillar. However, it's going to be giving energy or food to a creature called the pine marten. Same thing if you're looking at the badgers. A badger might be consuming something such as a beetle. However, it could become a meal for an animal such as an owl. And this is what we call an energy pyramid. So an energy pyramid is a diagram showing how much energy is passed from one organism to the next in a food chain.
Not everybody likes the same kind of food, right? That's probably a good thing. I mean, all the more pizza for me. But whether we eat milkshakes or mangoes, pizzas or pears, tacos or toast, we use the energy that's in our food to stay alive. But how did that energy get into our food in the first place? The answer is that energy flows between living things. It's almost like each form of food is a link in a chain. A food chain. You might have heard that humans are on the top of the food chain because we eat pretty much everything, and except for the occasional video game monster and maybe the odd bear, nothing tries to eat us. But what is a food chain exactly? A food chain is a model that shows how energy flows between living things. You can think of animals and plants in the same food chain as all living in the same neighborhood, which scientists call a habitat, and they all have a job to do, interacting with each other day in and day out. Together, they form a kind of system, a self-contained collection of different things that all work together as a whole. And they also interact with the non-living stuff around them, like the water, the air, the ground, and the sun. Put it all together, and what do you get? A special system called an ecosystem. And food chains show us what eats what in an ecosystem. Now, everything that's alive is in a food chain, including you, my friend. And actually, most living things are in more than one food chain, depending on what or who they're munching on at the moment. I mean, you don't eat the same thing for dinner every night, do you? Didn't think so. Now, let's see how a food chain works by making a diagram of how these interactions happen in nature. First, all of the energy that's in a food chain starts with the sun. I can't stress that enough, people. Plants take the energy from the sun's rays and change it into chemical energy. So, when a nice patch of lush green grass starts to grow, it's capturing some of the energy from the sun to do it. Then, when an animal, like a rabbit, wanders by and nibbles on that grass, the energy from the plant is transferred into the rabbit's body. Now, if a hungry hawk decides that the rabbit would make a yummy supper, then the energy from the rabbit is transferred to the hawk. And in this ecosystem, nothing is large or brave enough to take on the hawk. I mean, just look at her. So we've hit the top of the food chain, and we've just made a nifty model of it. So, a food chain is a model that shows how energy flows between living things in an ecosystem. Energy in a food chain starts with the sun, which is turned into chemical energy by plants. And this energy moves up the food chain as animals eat the plants, and then other animals eat those animals. And speaking of energy, I'm starving, so I'm off to take my place in the food chain. See you next time.